The air in the reception hall was thick with the scent of lilies and hairspray. It was a sweet, cloying smell that coated the back of my throat. I sat at a small table near the back, the one tucked away by a service door, designated for distant relatives and the stray friends of parents. From here I could see everything. I saw my son, David, laughing too loudly with his father-in-law, his hand on the man's shoulder in a gesture of familiar camaraderie I had not felt from him in years. I saw his wife, Sharon, adjusting the train of our granddaughter's dress, her movements sharp and proprietary, as if she were arranging a prize orchid for judging. And I saw Tiffany, my granddaughter, a vision in white, a stranger sculpted from the little girl who used to fall asleep in my lap, smelling of sunshine and cinnamon. I had worn my best dress, a deep plum silk that my late husband, James, always said made my eyes look like twilight. I'd had my hair done at the salon, the ladies there clucking over me, telling me how proud I must be. And I was. A deep, quiet pride that lived in my bones. But it was a pride tinged with a familiar loneliness, the kind that comes from watching a life you started from a great and silent distance. I held the envelope in my lap. It was a heavy cream-colored thing. Inside was a check with enough zeros on it to make a younger me gasp. It was for the down payment on the house they wanted. The little starter home with the picket fence Tiffany had shown me pictures of on her phone, scrolling so fast I could barely see. "It's perfect, Grandma," she'd said, not looking at me. "Just perfect." This check was my contribution to that perfection. It was what I was for. A resource. A quiet, reliable well from which to draw. The photographer, a young man with a frantic energy, began to call for the family photos. "Bride and groom with the bride's parents," he shouted, and Sharon and her husband bustled forward, beaming. Then, with the groom's parents. David and Sharon stepped up, David looking stiff and uncomfortable in his rented tuxedo. Then siblings, then the whole wedding party. Laughter echoed off the high ceilings. Flashbulbs popped, freezing smiles in time. I watched, my hands folded over the envelope. I waited for my name to be called. I am the matriarch, I thought, a strange hollow thought. The root of this particular tree. Surely there is a photo for the root. But the calls stopped. The photographer started arranging Tiffany and her new husband in couples poses. A dip, a kiss, a laugh over the shoulder. I saw Tiffany glance over at me. Her smile faltered for a second. She whispered something to Sharon, who then whispered something to David. David's face tightened. He shook his head, a tiny, almost imperceptible motion. But I saw it. I have spent a lifetime learning to read the silences of my son. Tiffany broke away from her husband and walked toward me. Her dress whispered against the polished floor. She was beautiful. Heartbreakingly so. She crouched down beside my chair, bringing the scent of lilies and panic with her. "Grandma," she began, her voice a low, urgent murmur. She took my hand. Her skin was smooth and cool. Mine was dry and mapped with the story of my life. "You look so lovely. You are the beautiful one today, baby," I said. My voice was steady. She squeezed my hand. Her eyes darted toward the photographer, then back to me. "Listen, Grandma. We're doing the main photos now. The ones for the big album, you know? The ones we'll frame. I knew. It's just, Sharon and we have a certain look we're going for. A specific aesthetic. It's all been planned for months. The colors, the lighting, the composition." She said the word composition, as if it were a fragile, expensive thing. I waited. The music from the dance floor was a dull throb in the background. "Please don't be in the photos." The words didn't land like a blow. They landed like a feather. A single soft thing that settles after a great storm, signifying the end. It wasn't a moment of anger. It wasn't a moment of shock. It was a moment of absolute soul-deep clarity. The final piece of a puzzle I had been assembling my entire life clicked into place. I saw it all. The Christmases I was told not to bring my sweet potato pie because the kids prefer pumpkin from the store, the birthdays I was called to babysit for, only to be sent home before the adult party began. The way they spoke to me in short, simple sentences, as if my mind had aged faster than my body. The way my stories, the tales of sit-ins and marches, of a life lived with courage and faith, were met with polite, vacant smiles before the subject was changed back to their jobs, their vacations, their lives. I had been a ghost in their lives for years, a benevolent, useful spirit who provided comfort and funds, but was otherwise transparent. Tonight, they just wanted to make sure the camera couldn't see me either. I looked at my granddaughter's perfectly made-up face, at her anxious, pleading eyes. She wasn't being cruel. Cruelty requires intent. This was something far worse. This was indifference. I was a problem of aesthetics. An old, dark-skinned woman in a plum dress who didn't fit the composition of her perfect, modern life. A smile found my lips. It was not a performance. It was genuine. The kind of smile that comes with a great and terrible relief. The relief of being released from a duty you no longer wish to perform. "I understand," I said. And I did. I understood completely. I let go of her hand. With my other hand, I picked up the cream-colored envelope from my lap. I held it for a moment, feeling its weight. The weight of their perfect house. The weight of my obligation. Then I placed it into the large, fashionable purse that sat on the empty chair beside me. The click of the clasp was quiet, but to me it sounded like a door locking. I looked at Tiffany. Her eyes were wide, confused. She had expected tears or an argument, or a wounded retreat. She did not expect the smile. She did not expect the quiet click of the purse. I rose from my chair. My knees complained, as they always did, but I stood tall. I smoothed the front of my plum silk dress. "Enjoy your evening, baby," I said. I turned and walked away. I did not look back. I walked past the laughing guests, past the clinking glasses, past the blur of my son's face, his mouth slightly agape. I walked out of the reception hall, through the grand lobby with its scent of wilting lilies, and out into the cool, clean night air. I did not rush. My steps were even and deliberate, each one taking me further away from the life where I was a ghost and closer to the life where I would simply be myself. I walked out forever. The motel room smelled of lemon-scented cleaner and something vaguely stale, like old cigarette smoke trapped in the curtains. It was an anonymous room. Beige walls, a brown-patterned bedspread, a painting of a sailboat on a placid lake. It was perfect. It was a place with no history, no memories. A blank page. I sat on the edge of the stiff bed and took off my shoes. My feet ached. I placed my purse on the nightstand. The weight of the check inside it felt different now. Not like a gift, but like a shield. A declaration. My own declaration of independence. I didn't cry. The time for tears had passed long ago. Shed in quiet moments over the years, one for each small cut, each casual dismissal. Tonight, there was only a profound stillness in my soul. A calm that was as wide and deep as the night sky. For years, I had been running a race I didn't know I was in, trying to earn a place I thought was mine by right. The place of a mother, a grandmother. The heart of a family. I had baked and sewed and babysat and given. I had offered my stories, my wisdom, my love, my money. I had poured all of myself into the cracks of their busy lives, hoping to fill the spaces they had for me. But the spaces kept getting smaller. Tiffany's words were not the wound. They were the diagnosis. They confirmed the sickness I had refused to see. I was not the heart of their family. I was the appendix. A vestigial organ they were vaguely aware of, mostly ignored, and occasionally found inconvenient. And tonight, they had decided to have it removed for the sake of a photograph. I stood up and walked to the small counter where a coffee maker sat next to two paper-wrapped plastic cups and a packet of instant coffee. I made a cup of tea instead, using the single sad-looking tea bag provided. I sat in the worn armchair by the window, which overlooked the parking lot and the glowing sign of a 24-hour diner. I sipped the weak, hot tea and thought about James. He would have been furious. James had a fire in him that I had always admired. He never let anyone diminish him. "Eleanora," he would have said, his voice a low rumble. "You are a daughter of kings and queens from a land you've never seen. You stand on the shoulders of women who survived the unsurvivable. You do not allow yourself to be made small." I had allowed myself to be made small. I had shrunk myself to fit into their lives, folding my edges, quieting my voice, hiding my own brilliant colors so as not to clash with their carefully curated palette. I had done it out of love, or what I thought was love, but love is not supposed to require erasure. I finished the tea and placed the cup on the table. I went to my purse and took out a small leather-bound journal and a pen. I had carried a journal for 50 years. It held the truth of my days. I opened it to a fresh page. The date was already written at the top. Underneath it I wrote, "Tonight my granddaughter asked me to be invisible. She gave me the gift of truth, wrapped in the cruelty of a photograph. She told me I did not belong in the picture of her perfect life. I have been trying to belong for a long time. I see that now. It is a fool's errand to beg for a place at a table where you are not wanted. Tonight I stopped begging. I took back my gift. I took back my dignity. I walked out of the picture. My son David saw me leave. He did not follow. In his inaction he gave me the same gift as his daughter. The gift of clarity. I am 78 years old. I have lived through segregation, through the fight for rights, through loss in love and raising a child who has become a stranger. I have survived. But I am done with surviving their neglect. It is time to live." I closed the journal. The words on the page were solid. They were real. They were the foundation of what came next. The first call came the next morning. It was David. I looked at his name on the screen of my phone. David. Just his name. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. A few minutes later a message appeared. I didn't listen to it. I deleted it. Not replied. Deleted. The action was small, but it felt monumental. It was a vote for myself. The second call was from a number I didn't recognize. I answered. "Mrs. Covington?" A bright, professional voice asked. "This is she. This is Allison Adebayo. I'm an attorney. Your friend, Martha Jean from the church choir, gave me your number. She said you might need some assistance, Martha Jean. A woman who saw everything and said little, but whose actions were always swift and true. I had called her last night from the motel, my voice calm, and told her a shortened version of the story. She just listened. I know someone, was all she said. She's good. She's a dragon. I'll have her call you." "Yes," I said to the dragon on the phone. "Yes, I think I do. We met that afternoon." Ms. Adebayo's office was on the top floor of a glass building downtown. It was clean and modern, with abstract art on the walls and a view of the entire city. She was a tall, elegant woman in a sharp navy suit, her hair in intricate braids. She looked to be about Tiffany's age, but her eyes held a wisdom far beyond her years. She didn't offer me platitudes or sympathy. She offered me coffee and a legal pad. "Tell me everything, Mrs. Covington," she said, her pen poised. "Start from the beginning. Not last night's beginning. The real beginning." So I did. I told her about the joint bank account David had convinced me to open with him, just in case of an emergency. I told her about the power of attorney I'd signed over to him after my heart scare 5 years ago, a document he'd had drawn up with his own lawyer. I told her about the house, my house, paid off for 20 years, the house James and I had built our lives in, and how David had recently been making suggestions about selling it, about moving me into a more manageable assisted living facility. I spoke for nearly an hour. Ms. Adebayo didn't interrupt. She just listened, her pen scratching across the page, her expression unreadable but intensely focused. When I finally fell silent, the story laid bare between us, she capped her pen. "Okay," she said, her voice crisp. "Here is what we are going to do." There was no hesitation, no doubt. She laid out a plan with the precision of a general mapping a battle. First, we would go to my bank. I would close the joint account and open a new one in my name only at a different branch. Second, she would draft a revocation of power of attorney, effective immediately. We would have it notarized and sent via certified mail to my son. Third, we would begin the process of updating my will and establishing a living trust. "A trust," she explained, "will give you complete control over your assets while you are alive, and ensure they are distributed exactly according to your wishes after you are gone, without the need for probate court, where your son could potentially contest a revised will. I felt a wave of relief so profound it almost made me dizzy. This was real. This was concrete. This was the architecture of my new life. Who? She asked, looking at me directly. Do you want in your life, Mrs. Covington? Who do you trust? It was a simple question, but it struck me to my core. I had to think. The list was so much shorter than I ever would have imagined. Martha Jean, my cousin in Atlanta, and Simone, my younger granddaughter, David's niece from his estranged sister. Simone was a quiet girl, an artist who lived a few towns over. She always remembered my birthday with a handmade card. She called just to talk, asking about my gardenias, about what book I was reading. She saw me. My granddaughter Simone, I said. The name felt good to say aloud. Good, Ms. Adebayo nodded. We have a starting point. We went to the bank first. The bank manager, a kind man named Mr. Henderson, looked concerned as I explained what I wanted to do. He knew David. David had been here with me many times. Is everything all right, Eleanora? He asked, his voice low. Everything is finally being made right, Charles, I said. I signed the papers. I watched as the substantial sum in the joint account was transferred to a new account that bore my name and my name alone. I was given a new debit card, a new checkbook. I felt a sense of power I hadn't realized I had lost. It was the feeling of holding the keys to your own house. Next, we went to a notary. I signed the revocation of power of attorney. The notary's stamp came down on the paper with a satisfying thud. It felt as final as a judge's gavel. By the time Ms. Adebayo dropped me back at the motel, the sun was setting. My phone showed 7 missed calls from David and 3 from Sharon. There was a string of text messages. Mom, where are you? This isn't funny. You ruined Tiffany's night. She was crying. Pick up the phone. We're worried. Worried. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about the disruption. About the story they would have to tell. About the check they assumed was still in an envelope on that empty table. I sat on the bed and deleted them all one by one. I turned the phone off. The silence in the room was a blessing. That night, I slept more soundly than I had in years. I dreamed of my garden, of the feel of rich soil in my hands, of the scent of jasmine on a warm evening. I dreamed of being rooted in my own earth. The next day, I checked out of the motel. It was time to go home. But I wasn't going back to the same house I had left. I was going back to my house. The first thing I did when I walked through the door was call a locksmith. I need my locks changed, please. As soon as possible. While I waited, I walked through the rooms. The house felt different. It was no longer a museum of a family that had moved on. It was my space. My sanctuary. The air was thick with the dust of memories, and I knew I had to clear it out. I started in the living room. On the mantelpiece was a row of framed photographs. David's graduation. Sharon and David's wedding. Tiffany as a baby, then a toddler, then a sullen teenager. The perfect family, smiling out from their silver frames. I took them down one by one. I did not break them. I did not throw them away. I wrapped each one carefully in newspaper and placed them in a cardboard box. Then I went to the hall closet and took down the large, formal portrait of the 5 of them, taken at a studio a few years back. The one they'd given me for Christmas. The one where I could see Sharon had subtly angled her body to block a part of me from view. I took it down and placed it in the box with the others. The walls looked bare now but clean, ready for something new. The locksmith came, a young man who worked quickly and efficiently. He handed me 2 new keys. They were shiny and sharp. I put one on my key ring and the other in the small china dish on the hall table where I kept my treasures. My phone, when I finally turned it back on, was a battlefield of missed calls and frantic texts. The tone had shifted from worried to angry. Mom, my card for the joint account was declined. What is going on? Did you take the money out? All of it. Sharon says we need to call the police and report you as a vulnerable adult being manipulated. Vulnerable. Manipulated. They were already building their narrative. The story of the confused old woman who had been taken advantage of, or who was acting out of spite and senility. They could not conceive of the truth. That I was a rational woman who had simply made a decision. Their inability to see me as a person with agency was the very reason I had to do this. I deleted the messages. I blocked David's number. I blocked Sharon's. I felt a pang of something, not regret, but a deep aching sorrow for the relationship I wished we had. For the son I remembered as a little boy who thought I was the strongest person in the world. But that boy was gone. That relationship was an empty shell. And I was done living inside it. That afternoon, I went into the cedar chest at the foot of my bed. Inside, wrapped in acid-free paper, was the quilt. The cathedral window quilt I had spent 2 years making, piece by tiny folded piece. It was a masterpiece of color and patience. I had made it for Tiffany's wedding gift. My fingers traced the intricate stitches. Each one held a prayer, a hope for her happiness. I folded it carefully and placed it in a box. I would send it to Simone. She would understand its worth. Next, I tackled the kitchen. I baked a sweet potato pie. The scent of cinnamon, nutmeg, and melting butter filled the house, chasing away the ghosts. It was my recipe, my mother's recipe before that. The one they had rejected. As I rolled out the dough, I thought of all the years I had spent trying to feed them, to nourish them with food and with love. They had refused both. When the pie was done, golden and fragrant, I let it cool on the counter. I cut one perfect slice. I put it on my best china, the plates I never used. I sat at my own kitchen table, in the quiet of my own house, and I ate it. It was the most delicious thing I had ever tasted. A few days later, a letter arrived. The penmanship was looping and artistic. It was from Simone. Dearest Grandma L, I don't know if you'll get this. I tried calling, but your phone seems to be off. I had to write. I need you to know that I saw. I was at the wedding, sitting in the back, and I saw what happened. I saw Tiffany talk to you, and I saw you leave. And I am so sorry. It was a horrible thing to do. It was cruel and thoughtless, and it made me ashamed. Ashamed of her, and of Uncle David and Aunt Sharon for letting it happen. They're telling everyone you had a senior moment, and got confused and wandered off. I know that's not true. I saw your face. You weren't confused. You were dignified. I just want you to know that I see you. I always have. Your stories are my favorite stories. Your pie is the only pie that matters. Your home is the only place that ever really felt like home to me. I hope you are okay. I love you. Yours, Simone. I read the letter 3 times, my hand pressed to my chest. Here it was. A lifeline. A single, steady voice in the wilderness of their noise. Validation. Acknowledgement. Love without condition. I picked up the phone and called her. She answered on the first ring. Grandma. Her voice was full of relief. Hello, baby, I said, and for the first time since that night, I let the tears come. They were not tears of pain, but of gratitude. The knock on the door came the following Saturday. A hard, insistent rapping that meant it wasn't a friendly neighbor. I looked through the peephole. It was David and Sharon. Their faces were grim. I took a deep breath. I was ready. I opened the door. They stared at me, then at the new lock they had not been given a key for. Mom, David said, his voice tight with frustration. We've been trying to reach you for a week. We were about to file a missing persons report. I was never missing, David. I was simply unavailable, I said calmly. I did not invite them in. I stood in the doorway, a human threshold they could not cross without my permission. What is going on? Sharon demanded, pushing past him slightly. The bank accounts. The phone calls. You have everyone worried sick. No, I said, my voice quiet but firm. You are not worried. You are inconvenienced. There is a difference. David's face flushed with anger. Inconvenienced? You walked out of your granddaughter's wedding. You embarrassed all of us. And you took all the money out of our account. Let's be clear, I said, looking him directly in the eye. I walked out of a reception where I was told I was not welcome in the family photographs. And I moved my money from a joint account into my own private account. There is nothing illegal or irrational about that. It is called managing my own affairs. A certified letter had arrived from Ms. Adebayo's office just yesterday. The revocation of power of attorney. I could see the knowledge of it in his eyes. He had lost his power and he was furious. "This is because of the pictures, isn't it?" Sharon said, her tone dripping with condescension. "You're punishing us because Tiffany wanted her wedding album to look nice. It was nothing personal." "You're being so dramatic." "It was entirely personal," I replied, my voice losing none of its calm. "It was the culmination of 1,000 personal slights I have quietly endured for years. It was simply the last one. You wanted me to be invisible. I have decided to grant your wish. You will find my life is no longer visible to you." "What is that supposed to mean?" David asked, his bluster starting to fade, replaced by a flicker of genuine confusion. "It means this conversation is over. I am selling this house. My will has been changed. My legal and financial affairs are in a new order, one that does not include you or your wife. You wanted me to step out of the picture. I have. I've stepped out of the entire album," Sharon gasped. David just stared, his mouth opening and closing silently. They were seeing me for the first time. Not as their mother, their resource, their problem, but as a woman, person, one who was drawing a line they could never uncross. "You can't do this," he finally stammered. "This house, my childhood." "Your childhood is a memory, David. This house is my property. And I am done here." I began to close the door. "Mom, wait," he said, putting a hand out. I stopped the door open just a crack. I looked at his hand, then at his face. For a fleeting second, I saw the little boy who used to run to me for comfort. But he was gone. In his place was a man who had watched his daughter dismiss his mother and had said nothing. A man who was more concerned with his bank account than my heart. "Goodbye, David," I said. And I closed the door. I did not slam it. I closed it gently and turned the new solid deadbolt. The click was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. I leaned against the door for a moment, my heart beating steadily in my chest. There was no triumph, only a vast, quiet peace. The peace of a clean and empty room. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of methodical dismantling. Miss Adebayo was, as Martha Jean had promised, a dragon. She handled everything. Realtors, estate planners, tax advisors. I moved through the process in a state of calm focus. Sorting through the house was the hardest part. Every object held a memory. I created 3 piles. One for keeping, one for donation, and one for the box I had labeled the past. The keeper pile was small. My books, my gardening tools, my photographs of James and my own parents, the little handmade cards from Simone. The donation pile was enormous. Furniture, old clothes, dishes. Into the past box went all of it. The silver frames, David's old report cards, the christening gown I had saved. It was not an act of anger, but of release. I was letting go of the woman I had been in their lives. The keeper of memories they did not value. Simone came every weekend to help. She never asked too many questions. She just worked alongside me. Her presence a quiet comfort. We packed boxes, shared stories, and drank tea. One afternoon, I gave her the cathedral window quilt. She unfolded it, her eyes wide with awe. "Grandma, it's a work of art," she whispered, her fingers tracing the stitches. "I want you to have it," I said. "It was made with love. It should go where it will be loved back." She hugged me, burying her face in my shoulder. "I love you, Grandma L. I love you too, baby." The house sold in less than a month. I found a small, bright apartment in a quiet building across town, near a park and a library. It had a balcony just big enough for a few large pots. For my gardenias. Moving day was strange. Watching the contents of my life being loaded into a truck felt like shedding an old skin. The last thing to go was the box labeled the past. I had it sent to a storage unit. I didn't want it, but I couldn't bring myself to destroy it. It was a part of my story. It just wasn't the part one was living anymore. When the house was empty, I walked through it one last time. The rooms echoed. The walls were marked with the ghosts of picture frames. I felt a pang of nostalgia, a sadness for the life that had been lived there. But it was a gentle sadness, like remembering a dream. I closed the door behind me and didn't look back. My new life began. It was quiet. It was simple. It was mine. I woke with the sun. I drank my tea on the balcony, listening to the city wake up. I planted my gardenias and talked to them as I watered them. I joined a book club at the library. I volunteered at the local women's shelter, the one Ms. Adebayo had helped me name as a beneficiary in my new trust. I spent hours there sorting donations, making coffee, or just sitting with women who had stories far harder than mine. In their resilience, I found a new perspective. My hurt was real, but it had not broken me. It had remade me. Simone visited often. We'd go for walks in the park, or she'd bring her sketchbook and draw while I read. We didn't talk much about David or Tiffany. There was no need. Our relationship existed in its own space, a garden we were tending together. One day, a thick envelope arrived in the mail. There was no return address, but I recognized David's handwriting. I let it sit on my kitchen counter for 3 days. I looked at it every time I walked by. It was a test. Was I ready? Did I even care what was inside? On the 4th day, I opened it. It was a long letter, several pages long. It was an apology, a real one. He wrote about the shame he felt, about how my silence had been a mirror he was forced to look into. He wrote that he had been a coward, too afraid of Sharon's disapproval, too caught up in his own life to see me as a person. He wrote that he missed his mother. He didn't ask for money. He didn't ask to be put back in the will. He just asked if one day he could call me. I read the letter. I folded it and put it back in the envelope. I did not feel anger. I did not feel a rush of forgiveness. I felt a quiet, neutral stillness. His apology was about him. His shame, his regret, his needs. It was a start, perhaps. But my life was no longer about fulfilling his needs. I placed the letter in a drawer. I did not reply. Not yet. Maybe one day I would. But it would be on my time. On my terms. The door to my life was no longer wide open for him to walk through whenever he pleased. It was closed. If he wanted to enter again, he would have to knock and wait and see if I was willing to answer. I went out to my balcony. The first gardenia had bloomed. The scent was rich and sweet. It filled the air, a perfume of my own choosing. I closed my eyes and breathed it in. I was not invisible. I was not a ghost. I was Eleanora Covington. I was 78 years old, and I was finally blessedly free. My new composition was one of my own making, and it was beautiful. The light was just right, and I was in every single picture.